Good, excuse me, sorry. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the licensing panel this morning. My name is Councillor David Curtis. I'm going to chair this morning's meeting. On my right, I have Olivia Quinn from Democratic Services, and I'd like to invite other members of the panel and officers to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Chris Mills, part of the licensing panel. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Ian Shenton.
Nigel Bell, Council Solicitor.
Good morning, Maggie O'Hare, Licensing Officer.
Lovely, thank you very much. We now move to the agenda. Olivia, do we have any apologies for absence?
No, Chair.
Thank you. And do any members of the panel have any disclosures of interest? No. Thank you. So, I'll now hand over to Licensing Officer Maggie to present the application. Thank you, Maggie.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, councillors. Morning, everybody. We're here today to determine an application for a new premises licence for a cider and music festival following objections relevant to one or more of the licensing objectives. The premises, known as Stratford-on-Avon Rugby Club, is located on Loxley Road, Stratford-upon-Avon. The rugby grounds are situated in the midst of a residential area with dwellings bordering the perimeter of the grounds, and a location map is attached at Appendix 1, which is page 7 in the bundle. The applicant is James Dean, the CEO of On-Tick Limited, Carter House, Stanier Way, Derby. On-Tick Limited are an events company specialising in running large-scale events around the country. A previous application was presented to panel on the 3rd of April 2025 when it was opened and subsequently adjourned to allow local residents and relevant responsible authorities time to review and consult on additional documents submitted that day. As a consequence, the application was withdrawn by the applicant and a brand new application was submitted later that day, incorporating a number of variations. The applicant has reduced the event to 2 days, shortened the daily operating hours by 1 hour, and now proposes to hold a one-off event in 2025 rather than staging it annually. The application before you seeks to hold a cider and music festival on Saturday the 12th and Sunday the 13th of July 2025. The application seeks to allow the provision of boxing and wrestling outdoors on the Saturday and Sunday between the hours of 12 midday and 7 o'clock in the evening. The remaining licensable activities scheduled for both days include live and recorded music, as well as performances of dance, all taking place both indoors and outdoors. These activities will run from 12 midday to 2200 hours on Saturday, and again on Sunday, commencing at 12 midday but ceasing at 9 p.m. The sale of alcohol for consumption both on and off the premises will mirror these times across the same 2 days. The full application can be found at Appendix 2, page 9 in the bundle. The applicant has also submitted several documents associated with the planning of the event. These are traffic management, noise management, event management, security management, drug policy and seizure plan, counter-terrorism plan, and event medical management plan. All of these documents can be found at Appendix 3, page 133 through to 123. Responsible authority representations. Representations have been made by both Mr Henry Biddington, Environmental Health and Licensing Manager, and Ben Ellis, Senior Environmental Health Officer of Stratford-on-Avon District Council. Both of these representations are attached at Appendix 4, page 125 through to 129. Mr Biddington has expressed concern relevant to the public safety licensing objective. These centre around the lack of on-site parking and egress and exit from the site and interaction with traffic. Proposed footfall per day is 2,500. Mr Biddington forwarded a number of questions to the applicant by email in this regard, and this email, together with a response from the applicant, can be found at Appendix 5, page 131 in the bundle. As a result of the response from the applicant relating to the safe evacuation of the site in the event of an emergency and mentioned in Appendix 5, a site visit was undertaken and photographs were taken of the proposed exit routes. These are given as via the neighbouring golf course and onto Loxley Road between properties numbered 43 and 45. These photographs can be viewed at Appendix 6, which is 133 in the bundle. Mr Ellis, Senior Environmental Health Officer at Stratford District Council, has raised concerns about the close proximity of the event to the residential properties. The rugby ground is directly behind these homes in Loxley Road and close to properties both on the Tiddington Road and Elgin Gardens. Mr Ellis is further concerned about the general noise and disruption from crowds leaving the event. His concerns are relevant to the prevention of public nuisance licensing objective. Objections to the application. We have received 4 representations from residents living in Loxley Road. These outline concerns around high volumes of traffic, noise issues, public nuisance, prevention of crime and disorder, and public safety. These representations can be found at Appendix 7. An email was received on the 1st of May from Mr Jason Savage, the chairman from Stratford-on-Avon Rugby Football Club. Mr Savage supports the application and outlines his reasoning in his email found at Appendix 8, which is page 159. Councillor Kate Rolfe has also provided a response to the licensing application and is found at Appendix 9. Options available to the licensing panel. Having regard to the representations, take one of the following steps, if any, as it considers appropriate for the promotion of the licensing objectives. Or 2, to grant the premises licence subject to the conditions stated in the operating schedule accompanying the application as agreed, which are protection, which can be modified to such an extent as the authority considers appropriate for the promotion of any licensing objectives. And any condition which must, under section 19, 20 or 21 of the mandatory conditions, be included in the licence, or to grant the premises licence subject to conditions at 2.2 A and B, but to exclude from the scope of the licence any of the licensable activities to which the application relates to, or to refuse to grant the premises licence. Thank you, Chair. That's my report.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Do any of the panel have any questions of clarification?
Hi, Maggie, thanks. You actually mentioned about the road closure and a permit. Do you know if that's been granted?
I understand that Mr Biddington might be able to answer that question at his point. Thank you.
Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So we'll move on to the list to the other speakers. So first of all, can I invite Joseph Cannon, KC, to speak on behalf of the applicant? Thank you.
There we go. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My name's Joe Cannon. I'm a barrister. I'm here on behalf of On Tick Limited, who's the applicant for the licence. Just to introduce who I've got around me, Mr Dean, who's the CEO of the company's on my left, the right as you look at him. And then I've got Mr Kelly, who's the festival director on my right, left as you look at him. And Mr Savage, who Ms O'Hare mentioned in the introduction, who's the chairman of the rugby club, is 2 seats down. So that's my team, as it were, although Mr Savage is not directly in the team. And just so you know what's going to happen, or what I'm proposing, is that I'll do most of the talking. Obviously, that's what I'm here to do. But these guys will answer any questions that you have at any point. So please feel free to do so. I mean, I will try and answer questions too, but they're the guys really in the know. Just to give you an idea of the next maybe 15 minutes or so, I'm going to give you an idea of what this idea is, what we're trying to do, and what we're asking you to grant. And then I'm going to just touch on what's said against us, as it were, because the 2 gentlemen here, I know, both say you shouldn't grant the licence. In the list of options that Ms O'Hare read out, that they're going, if you like, for the last option, which is refuse to grant the licence, as are, I think, the 4 residents who've made representation. So I'm just going to touch on those. And I'm going to finish by asking you to grant the licence, obviously, in the form that we've applied for, and say a few things about why you should do that. So that's the roadmap. The concept, first of all, so this is, as it says on the tin, really, it's a cider and music festival, but it's a concept that this organisation, OnTick, runs across the country. It's not a Stratford-specific first up. They've done it quite a few times elsewhere. Lichfield is the closest, I think, but a bunch of other places. There's one planned in Norwich, where I'm from, as it happens, this summer. So the concept is well established, and this is not either the first year or the first place that we've done it. The demographic that it attracts, and I can say this being 46 and a half, is approaching middle age, because the average ticket buying age is 47. So this is not intended to attract the youths. It's a family-oriented idea. Yes, there's cider and a range of ciders and food. There's going to be a fun fair, which is obviously children-oriented. The expectation is that families will come, and of the pre-sales, quite a number have been for family groups, including children. The music sort of reflects that. It's cover bands, essentially, sort of tribute bands. When we met this morning, I won't say who, but somebody said that they were always surprised at how uncool the bands that appear at these festivals are, and I think that's an interesting way of describing it. This is not a festival to attract youngsters particularly. It's a family thing. As you know, it's intended to happen over a weekend, 2 days in July, between midday and 10 o'clock on Saturday, and then 9 o'clock on Sunday. And the maximum attendance is 2,500 at any one time. But we don't expect 2,500 people to turn up at midday and those same 2,500 to leave at 10 o'clock. That isn't how this works. There'll be a drift in and there'll be a drift out. The venue is, I should just say actually that Ms. O'Hare mentioned that one of the things we've applied for is one of those quirks of licensing law, wrestling, boxing, but actually we don't need that anymore. That's not really part of the plan any longer. So if that causes you any concern, it doesn't seem to have caused anyone else any concern, but if that aspect of the application causes you any concern, you can remove that from the license without a problem. That was at one stage planned to be part of the entertainment offered for a limited time, as you know, but that's not really part of it any longer. So I should just tidy that up. While I'm tidying up, on the road closure, I'm going to come on and talk about that in a moment. I can give you an answer to that, very straight. In fact, you an answer to that in a straightforward way in a moment. The rugby club, and forgive me if you know all this, and you know the venue, it is a popular rugby club set behind a row of houses off Loxley Road. And I know no one's trying to mislead anyone here. It's not surrounded by residential properties. It's on three sides, essentially, it's open. There's a golf course beyond it. But on one side, there are residential properties. And the concerns about noise and disturbance are about that one side along Loxley Road, the properties at the back of Loxley Road. As you know, the rugby club, very supportive of this. And I hope you've read Mr. Savage's email, which explains what's behind the rugby club's initiative. And that leads me on to this point, which is that every November, the rugby club, you may know this, hosts a bonfire night, a very successful bonfire night celebration with fireworks at the rugby club. Upwards of 4,000 people. In fact, it was the best ever year was a couple of years ago, nearly 5,000, 4,700 odd, on a Sunday evening, so night before a work and school day. And they run that themselves. They're sort of enthusiastic amateurs in terms of event management. And they've been doing that for 30 years. I'm not going to say without complaint. Obviously, these things cause a bit of disruption, but they've been doing it for a long time, and it works. And it's an extremely popular event. And as Mr. Savage says in his email to you, what the rugby club is really keen to do is to try and, to some extent, replicate the model that brings them a bit of extra revenue with an event in order to support the running of the club. And this is essentially where they've alighted in the summer months, where the rugby club is much less used. In November, it's the middle of the rugby season. Mr. Savage was telling me this morning that they have the kids on the rugby field in the morning, they all get cleared, everybody turns up for the fireworks at dusk, and by Monday morning it's all gone. So this is a slightly different model to that, but it's fewer people and a essentially the same idea. So the venue works as a place to have this sort of number of people, in fact quite considerably more, getting them in and out for an event of that nature, and that's really why this idea has come forward. You will also have seen, and I hope you've had a chance to at least look at the bulk of them, unlike the bonfire night, which, and I'm not in any way being disrespectful to Mr. Savage and his team, is run by the rugby club as essentially rugby people putting on an event. For this event, you've got a highly professional team of skilled experts in the field who've put together a suite of plans and documents which are intended to address all of the concerns that events like this quite properly raise. Will there be unnecessary disturbance? Will it work? Will people be able to get in and out? And you've got, I know you've seen them all, you've got the overarching event management plan, but within that you've got a noise management plan which deals directly with the question of particularly music noise, but also the noise from patrons coming and going. You've got a counter-terrorism plan, you've got an access and egress plan, medical. They've really thought about all the angles here, and the reason that they've done that is that this is what ONTIC does. That's their line of work. And the guys who, they are all guys in this case, the guys who have written these policies have done all this before. This is a tried and tested method, and that's before you, and ought to give you very great comfort that the issues that arise, and they really do, have been thought about in advance and dealt with, and they're in a plan and they can be managed. So I'm going to say a bit more about those in a minute. You've also seen that there's a professional security company as part of they're called 25/8, as part of the proposition, who will run crowd management as well as security on the day. But before I get into detail, I just want to be straight, which is that, and it's to say that we have to accept that getting 2,500 people onto a rugby field on a summer weekend will cause some disruption. Of course it will. That's absolutely inevitable. But the question is balance, really. What it will do, on the other hand, on the other side of the balance, is bring a great deal of benefit. So first of all, there's the obvious benefit to the rugby club. It's a revenue-generating idea. There's huge support for this idea as well. A great number of the people who go to the rugby club are in favour of the idea. The Facebook group for the rugby club is full of positive comments about it. There's a great deal of support for this as well. And of course, there's a long tradition, isn't there, in this country of one-off events, often over the summer, yes, causing a bit of disruption, but also providing a benefit. They're part of British life, you know, that roads are sometimes closed, there's a bit of noise generated, daily life might have to change a little for a limited period of time, but there's a great benefit in these things happening. And I'm going to invite you to find that here, it's not a one-way, it's not all one way. Obviously, there's some disruption to think about, but the balance favours giving these guys a chance and granting the licence. So I'm going to just deal, as I said I would now, with the objections, with the representations that are made. Only, and I say this on purpose, only 4 residents have objected to this. They're perfectly entitled to, of course they are, quite proper that they do. But as you know, more than 4, or as you might know, more than 4 had objected to the initial application, which has since been considerably scaled back. So it's a mark of the movement and the recognition of the legitimacy of those observations that ONTIC have thought again, scaled back the hours, scaled back the duration and the numbers attending. And there are, I don't mean this in any way to minimise it, but there are only 4 residents who are saying this is too much, this disruption on a Saturday and Sunday in July is too much for us. But the real point is that it is obvious that there's been a great deal of work done to minimise the disruption. I'm not saying for a minute that it gets rid of it altogether, of course it doesn't. But there is a great deal of work that has been done to minimise the effect. So first of all, there's the scaling back that I've talked about already. The thinking again, can we really go on to 11? Let's bring it back. Should it really be more than 2 days? No, let's contain it in the weekend. But there's also technical stuff. I don't know how much you've read of the noise management report, but there's a state-of-the-art speaker system, which the obvious point first is directed away from the houses. The great advantage of this site is that the noise-sensitive premises are all in one direction. to the south and west, essentially. So the sound system, first point, analog point, is that it's directed away across the golf course, and I think it's a school, isn't it, beyond the golf course. So there are no noise-sensitive premises in that direction. The less obvious point, the more technical point, is that this is a state-of-the-art system, which is in itself very directional. So it sends the sound waves in a very particular way. I don't want to get into the details of acoustics because they're extremely complicated and I don't really understand them. But these days, there are systems which can do that. They don't blast noise out 360. They're very directional, and this is one of those. And the particular advantage of this one is that it stops bass noise, which is often the most disturbing noise for people who live around. It stops it going backwards, as it were. It's a system that's particularly sensitive to stopping bass noise from going in the wrong direction, if you like, the other direction from which it's directed. So that's the sort of technical point. The noise management report recommends and says that a noise limit of 65 dBA LAEQ 15 minutes, that's the technical particular measurement of noise, will be kept to at the noise-sensitive premises. And I know there's some concern from Mr. Ellis about whether that can be met, but we're perfectly happy for that to be a condition of the licence. So it would be a condition of the licence that those specified noise levels be achieved and not exceeded. And what about if they're not? Well, as you've read, Mr. Leland, who's in charge of the noise elements of it, will be proactively monitoring noise throughout the festival with proper noise monitoring equipment at the relative monitoring stations. That's all set out in the plan. So that if noise levels do creep up, do start to look as if they're getting too loud, they can immediately be fed back to the sound stage and reduced. So there's a kind of ongoing, every 15 minutes type monitoring of what's going on, which is an extra layer of comfort over and above the condition. That's noise, at least from music. The next thing I want to talk about is access and egress, which is partly noise, but also partly public safety and the other representation that was made. The proposal is to apply for what's called a TTRO, an order that for a short period of time closes a short stretch of Loxley Road in order to facilitate the egress of people from the site. Now, I don't know whether you've been there or whether you've seen it, but there is it's not narrow, but there is an entrance from Loxley Road, the main entrance, into the rugby club. It's wide enough for two cars to pass. It's not it's not an alleyway, but it's, that's the only exit, and at least apart from emergency exits. And insofar as there's a concern that's been expressed about potential conflict between pedestrians leaving the site and traffic along Loxley Road, as a conservative measure, really, ONTIC are going to apply for a TTRO. Now, they can't do that until they know they've got, well, they could, I suppose, but they aren't going to do that until they know whether or not you've seen fit to grant them a licence. Now, time is a little bit short. The standard is 12 weeks from application to grant. That's the kind of guarantee. If, and I hope you will, if you grant this licence either today or in the next 5 days, that will leave about 11 weeks, which is enough time, or a bit less, but we're confident that that's enough time. If it isn't, we can't do it, and we'll have to do a contingency, but that's as we understand it, and I'm told that we're confident that that process can be achieved in the timescale. Obviously, the sooner we know, the sooner we can apply. So that's the direct answer to your question. It hasn't yet been applied for, but will be if the licence is granted. Another way in which the potential for effects, disruption is minimised here is that this is not a late night event, so noise from people leaving through that alleyway won't go beyond, at the absolute outside, 11 p.m. on Saturday night and 10 p.m. on Sunday night. The stage music stops, the bars close, and people go. And as you know, the festival ends at 10 on Saturday or is proposed to end at 10 and 9 on Sunday. And it won't take an hour to get everybody off site. So yes, there will be a bit of disruption at that time. Of course, you can't get that number of people, or however many it is, off a site without a bit of abnormality. But the idea is that won't go on into the wee small hours, and it's at the weekend. And it's an hour earlier on the Sunday, recognising that people work on Monday morning and perhaps the quieter environment starts earlier on a Sunday. And of course, as I've already said, it isn't one of those cases like the bonfire fireworks display where everybody will leave at the same time. At the fireworks display, the last firework goes off and everybody goes home. This won't be the same. There'll be a drift away. Families will leave earlier than that. We don't for a minute expect there to be 2,500 people leaving at the end of the event. And all of that is set out in really careful detail in the event management plan, which I hope you've had a chance to have a look at. And what I really want to say about that is that these events work best when you've pre-planned all the contingencies, when you've thought in advance about what might happen and stuck it down in a plan. And that's the great advantage of the ONTIC team here, because this is what they do for a living. They've done it many, many times, similar sized and much larger festivals. They know about the process. Now, I'm not saying that that guarantees that it all goes fine. Of course it doesn't. But I'm saying in this case, it's been thought about, and the potential for undue disturbance has really been minimised. And then the last point is really just a rhetorical point, but it is only one weekend. If I was sitting here asking for a permanent licence to have 2,500 people on the rugby club every Saturday and Sunday night, it would be a very different question for you. But this is one weekend in the summer, it's an event. And that, at least in my submission, changes the way you go about the balance. We're asking for authority to cause a little disruption for some very considerable benefits for a very specific and time-limited period, and only for this year. And the reason we're only asking for it for this year is that we recognise that it's the first time it's been held at this ground. To some extent, you might think, well, who knows what will happen? It's hard to predict exactly. So we're saying, okay, give us a go. 2025, we'll show you how good it is. And if it works, perhaps we'll come back next year and have a different kind of hearing. Who knows? Maybe we can convince the officers that we don't need to have a hearing at all. So all of those things are really important too. So the responsible authority representations, obviously we take those very seriously, just as we take the residents' representation seriously and adjusted our plan. Noise first, as I've already said really, you've got the noise management plan. An expert acoustician says that they can achieve the noise level that I'm inviting you to condition, 65 dBA. That's doubted, but how do you resolve that? The answer is you impose the condition, and it's then our responsibility to stick to it on pain of a criminal offence, effectively. We've also got, as I've said, a guy monitoring it actively, or not just one guy, some guys actively monitoring it. So I can understand the how do we know this will really be stuck to, but the answer is we've thought about it, and that's why we're putting it forward. It would be crazy to put forward a condition of that nature if we didn't think we could stick to it. And our expert advice from our acoustic expert is that that's absolutely achievable with the system that we've got. So if you do grant, if you are persuaded to grant this licence, then you can do so on condition that we stick to the noise levels set out in the noise management plan. Similarly with access and egress, I'm really just saying the same things again. There is annual experience of getting a large number of people out of the rugby club after an event, not with no disruption, but with minimised disruption. Not with no complaints, but with minimal complaints. And that's without the professional team of stewards and security that we've got here. There's also the demographic point, which I've already made. And then I'm told this morning, as we had our coffee and spoke this morning, one of the things that ONTIC do is in the 2 or 3 weeks before the event, there's an ability to communicate with everybody who's bought a ticket and just remind them that there is no on-site parking, that they would need to park nearby. There's a list of car parks, which are between, I think, 20 minutes and half an hour's walk away. And just a reminder that that is how you come to the festival. Don't expect to drive to Loxley Road and be able to park in the rugby club. That isn't going to happen. So there's a kind of communication possibility to even further minimise the concern. So really, those are the points I want to make. What you've got here is an application that's been put together by a highly experienced team who have done this sort of thing many times before, on a site where there is direct experience of, okay, not a music festival, but an event with more people on one night, without any serious problems, not without any disruption, of course. And the people who live by that alleyway will undoubtedly be aware that the festival's going on. We've invited them all with free tickets. If they want to come to the festival, they can. That might help, I don't know. It's a well thought through event. These are not fly-by-nights. There's a huge amount of thought that's gone into it, all of which is in your papers. And they're only asking for it for this year because they recognise that this is a new idea. It's a new event for this space, and they want a chance to prove essentially to you and the officers that they can do it properly and that the plans that they've produced are sound and will in fact minimise the disruption. As I've said probably 10 times now, there will be some disruption. The people who live on Loxley Road, on the north side of Loxley Road, will know that there's a music festival going on. They will know that it's finished, and they will know that people are leaving onto Loxley Road and going off. Of course they will. But there's a whole other side of that balance. Benefit to the rugby club, benefit to the, let's hope, 2,500 people a day who come and have a great time. These are exactly the kind of events that, when they're run well, are a great community asset. And in this case, the balance, when you look at the balance of potential disruption versus benefits, you can be confident that the disruption has been minimised. We've gone as far as, at least we think we can, to keep those disruptive elements to a minimum, for all the reasons I hope that I've set out already. So, look, that's what I wanted to say, really. As I've said already, the people here are all happy to answer questions. I'll leave it to you if you've got questions, but if I can help, then of course I will too.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Mr. Cannon. Just one point of clarification, and then I'll ask other members of the panel. It's not 11 weeks left for the road closure, it's only 7. So I just wonder how...
That's my mistake, sorry, that's my mistake. We've got 14 festivals this year, but yeah, 7.
How confident, I'm not quite sure to whom I should address this question, but how Maggie, can you help us on that one, please?
They say up to 12 weeks that it takes. They prefer up to 12 weeks. I'm not sure that they'll have enough time because it's a busy time of the year, but I can't speak on behalf of that team, I'm afraid.
Were the road closure not allowed, what would the implications be?
Can I help with that? I don't know if that... Well, I don't want to tread on anyone's toes, but I can certainly give you our answer. But
I'll have your answer first, and then Maggie's, if I may.
So, and I'll be corrected. But I think. Do you remember when I first mentioned the road closure? I said that it was a highly conservative measure. We think, frankly, that you can get these people out onto Loxley Road. There's a pavement on either side and away without any concern with conflict with traffic at that time of night along Loxley Road. But because of the concerns that were expressed, we're happy to take that measure and we'll apply. So just dealing with it in turn. First of all, how confident are we that we'll get the TTRO in that timescale? We are confident. It is up to 12 weeks. The Highway Authority always say up to 12 weeks. Our experience is that they do it quicker than that, and we're confident that they can do it in that time. If they can't, we've got a contingency plan, which is just increasing the number of marshals and making sure that the egress is managed much more tightly, keeping people to the footways and away. So the issue here is not about getting people down the exit way onto Loxley Road. It's once they get onto the highway and away, I think that's the concern, and whether they will then come into conflict with traffic. Our view, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, but our view is that that can be managed even without the road closure, but the road closure adds an extra level of comfort that there won't be any cars along there for that period of time.
Thank you. Maggie, would you like to add anything to that?
I mean, in light of the fact there's no parking on site and having local knowledge of that area, Manor Road comes off Loxley Road. That's always completely, fully chock-a-block with traffic.
Yeah.
I imagine that if there are vehicles parked in neighbouring car parks away from the event, it would just be footfall. But if vehicles do get abandoned, I have to say from personal experience, having lived that side of the river, even on bonfire night, vehicles get abandoned up and down the roads. So I'm hoping if that doesn't happen, it may be in order.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, you stole my thunder about the contingency plan for the road closure. I'm just put a couple of notes for myself here. There's one exit and one entrance on the site. If for whatever reason it was a big panic of festival goers leaving the site, how confident are we can get them away safely? Because there's entrance onto the golf course. And what are the golf course owners thought about 2,500 people trampling across their golf course? I don't know.
I don't think it'd be 2,500 people going across the golf course, but you're right. There's an emergency only access. There's a locked gate. You've probably seen the photograph of it that allows some egress. I mean, I think in an emergency, the golf course would be fine with that. It's difficult to see why there would be a panic, but if there would, then there is that extra access. And I believe there's even a third, relatively narrow. Yeah. Mr. Savage, I don't know whether it'd be helpful to have a look at the, if you look at the site plan, again, if you know this already, forgive me, so it's broadly, it's a rectangle oriented northwest to southeast along the parallel with Loxley Road, and the festival is in the southern eastern half, not a bit more than half. So there's the whole first team rugby field to the northwest as well, which if there was an issue would also be somewhere for crowds to go. So I think the answer to your question is, if that happened, there's a contingency for it. There's escape onto the golf course, but it's very unlikely that would be everybody at one stage. And there's the particular the ability to use the first 11 field as a holding area. Have I got that right?
Can I just, following up from that, just three rather sort of specific points. I mean, it is a very comprehensive plan, and it's been clearly well thought through, and ONTIC clearly has a lot of experience in managing these things. Presumably, you'd be in touch with the golf course to ensure that the gate's unlocked. Yeah. And just a couple of other things. On page 63, those who break site rules or terms and conditions are unfit due to alcohol and or drug consumption may be refused entry. I think I'd rather say that will be refused entry. I mean,
yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, obviously, there's no benefit to these guys to allow drunk people in. They will be. I think the policy says that we've got the power to do that, but obviously a decision will be taken.
And I was just thinking about the lost or vulnerable persons on page 65. I think, I don't organise events, but my understanding is that if there is a lost child, there is a lot of events have an immediate lockdown on exits. Would that be the case?
Yes is the answer, but we're going to tell you a bit more detail.
Well, yeah, just to say we within a time frame, of course, if a lost child or vulnerable person is declared missing, to react quickly and just lock the site down isn't necessarily the best way, because more often than not there's cases. So we would put together a case with our security where we would have male and female rep. Whether we're actually looking for a child or we have one would depend on the situation. And then after a period of about 10 minutes, if we are unable to reunite, then we would look to close the access out of the arena. Yeah.
Thank you. Ian?
Thank you. A couple of quick ones just to I've got a fair few questions, but I'll just start with a couple for now. Right at the very beginning, you said, when you spoke about the numbers, you said 2,500 at any one time. Are we saying that there would be more than 2,500 tickets sold?
Hopefully, we'll sell as many, but we can't let any more than 2,500 in at the same time. It's 2 days, so some people might come on Saturday, totally different set of people might come on Sunday. Some people might come both days, but what you can be sure of is that no more than 2,500 will be on the site at any time.
That's fine. No more rather than at any one time. Okay.
No more than that at any time.
And no more than 2,500 tickets will be sold.
For each day.
For each day.
Yes,
for each day. That's fine. Okay. Going on to the just having it, if I might
Please
continue.
Please.
If we look at the map on page 7 and the layout on page 91, if I've read this right, the stage area would back onto the houses on Loxley Road. Is that correct? Okay. So any sound would therefore be directed across, away. Would there be any sound behind the stage as such?
I mean, I think saying none would be difficult, but it will be minimal. I mean, perhaps you're the best place to answer that.
We use a system called a cardioid system, and you're welcome to do a bit of research on a cardioid system. It's a very highly advanced state-of-the-art system which prevents reverberating sound base going backwards. So just to give you an example, one of the letters of recommendation was from Lichfield City Council and the High Sheriff, and ultimately our Lichfield Festival, which has been running for many years, is 17 metres away from a nursing home with 95 elderly people into it, and they can't hear anything. I'm not saying that's because their ears don't work properly. I'm saying because over the years we've proved to them that this system, I'm not saying it completely means there's no noise, but the conventional way of music as many years ago, it's not like that anymore, but it's called a cardioid system, and you're welcome to Google it.
I'm okay.
So, the system, you say the system, the noise limit would be set at 55 dBA? 65, sorry, dBA. Okay. Is that, there's two questions in there, I suppose. Is that A, sufficient for the type of event, and B, could that be reduced any further?
Is it sufficient? Do you mean for it still to be an enjoyable event? Yes, is the answer. Obviously, that's a call for those who organise it. The advice is that that's the level, that's the sort of minimum level that they can get to. I don't know the answer, and Mr. Dean will tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that is as far as we can go. As you probably know, dBA is logarithmic in its scale, so it's not just a case of lopping off a few dBA, but yeah, certainly my understanding is that that's the level that we say is achievable while retaining an enjoyable experience.
I think it's important to point out as well is that it's not in the interest of our audience, mainly, at least 40% being children, some very young children. This isn't sort of an 18 to 24-year-old sort of rave. This is a family-orientated event with the likes of the Beatles and Elton John, so it's not really in our interest for it to be loud. To give you an idea, most of our other festivals that are on a much larger site are 20 dBA more than the 65 dBA at noise-sensitive premises.
Sorry, Chair.
Mr. Kelly's just going to add something.
Yeah, just to say, something as practice that we do with all of our festivals, we would have a sort of a noise hotline, which we would give that phone number out to all residents and all people in the local area. So if, for example, they feel as if there is, in breach of that noise, or if they are feeling as if it's an undue nuisance, that number could be called, and then that's held centrally on site. And that'll either be by sort of site manager or event controller who'll receive the call, and then will be able to dispatch our noise consultant to that location. So by the perimeter of the house, perhaps, that's got the noise complaint, where we can do noise readings, record that, log that, so that we can then go, we are in breach, or we are over our number, or we can actually then log that and say, no, we are within our license. But that's something, again, we want to make sure that we again can have that in the licensing conditions to say that we will have a logged noise hotline.
I think it's right not to make a sort of lawyer's point about. I think Mr. Ellis's concern is not about the level, whether that would be right, but about whether it can be achieved. I think it's that sort of a point rather than that level's too high, I think. But he'll speak for himself, I'm sure.
Lovely, thank you very much. There may be some more questions from the panel, but I think maybe at this stage it might be helpful to go on to our other speakers, and then if we have further questions, perhaps we could come back. So, Mr. Biddington.
Thank you, Chair. For introductions, my name is Henry Biddington, Environmental and Licensing Manager here at Stratford Council. So hopefully the panel of, you've seen my reps within the report submitted. I'm just going to elaborate a little bit on the reasons for putting in this representation. So my representation is in relation to public safety, and I do have continued concerns around public safety in relation to this event, in particular in relation to traffic, access and egress, and emergency access and egress. And I'll sort of elaborate on those a little bit as we go along. So, as we've heard what the event intends to be, and again, you know, the event management plan is good. You know, all the work been done into it. You know, as somebody who assesses event management plans a lot, it's all great. My concern is the location is not suitable for an event of this size. And I'll just go back to what's been said about the fireworks display. So our fireworks display, yes, does have more people, but it's on a Sunday evening in November. It's not over 2 days in the middle of the summer. And as we're aware, Stratford's quite a busy town, particularly in the summer. And this traffic, etc., will only add to those congestions. So there's already congestion issues, parking issues within the town. There's no parking on site. We've already established that. So the access will be through people travelling by cars to use the car parks within towns, which are already congested at this time of year. There is, you know, talk about public transport links. The event's finishing at 10 o'clock, so the buses don't always run that late, and if you can find a bus, that's good. And the trains again, so it's kind of, how are we getting people there? And it basically they have to park and walk. The road closure hasn't been applied for. There's no reason why it couldn't have been applied for by now, and as we say, we are 7 weeks out from the event. My concern is that is your primary way of controlling. In your traffic management plan itself, it states, you know, that is how you're going to ensure the safety of the people that attend the event. And if we haven't got the road closure, then I don't really understand how you've got no contingency within your traffic management plan to say what you're going to be doing. So, yeah, there are concerns around traffic, how we're going to get people onto site, how we're going to get people off site. So it is quite a narrow entrance and exit way. If we do need to evacuate, those emergency exit points, as demonstrated in those photographs, aren't particularly accessible, particularly the one onto the Loxley Road, which isn't the main entrance. I'd be concerned about large numbers exiting off there. I'd be concerned about how you're going to get emergency vehicles into the site if a large number of people are trying to exit. Yeah, and overall, I think there is a risk of people and vehicle collision due to the large numbers of people coming off the site, and vehicles will be on the roads due to the numbers of people trying to get in and out the site. So that's my concerns, Chair.
Thank you very much, Henry. Maggie, can I just ask a question for clarification? From memory, I don't think firework displays are licensed, are they? Or are they a licensable activity?
No, they're not. They're not licensable.
Which is a curious anomaly. So the firework display at the rugby club, the district council has. Does the district council have any control over how that is managed?
We don't oversee the actual fireworks display, but obviously if there's an involvement we license them for the sale of alcohol.
But not for the event itself?
No, we don't.
No, thank you. Perhaps that's something we ought to. Any questions for Henry?
Is it your contention then that without the road closure, this event shouldn't go ahead?
Thank you, Councillor. I don't think I think the road closure doesn't solve the problems of pedestrian access and ingress. Okay, so it will just move the issue further down the road. So we will have, if the road closure is in place, Manor Road will still be open, and that will be used as a diversion route. We're aware that Manor Road is quite often cars parked up along that road, so that will be essentially a single lane traffic road, which will increase the congestion and likelihood that people will be getting angry about getting stuck in traffic, and increase the likelihood of collision as people get frustrated. My response was they will cone off that road. Well, the only person that can cone off a road is the highway authority. So if it's not part of the road closure, there's no jurisdiction to cone off roads, and no reason why people would pay any attention to those cones. I think we've seen, particularly from the fireworks display, that the traffic and parking around those areas is not good, even with the road closure in place. And whilst I appreciate they do get 4,000 people on and off site, it's not without its concerns. And quite rightly, it's not a licensed event, but we do issue the road closure for that event.
So Henry, would it be, I don't want to try and, so I've understood your concerns correctly. You said the event management plan is good, and it does seem, as a non-expert, just a member of the committee, it does seem very, very comprehensive, but it unfortunately doesn't address the key problem, which is the site itself. And that's where I was thinking, although the organisation has a great deal of experience in managing events in different parts of the country, the particular problems that we seem to have, or a particular problem here, is the site itself, not the management of the event. Is that a reasonable thing? I've understood you correctly.
Chair, yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Mr. Ellis, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ben Ellis. I'm the Senior Environmental Health Officer for Stratford District Council. I've got over 15 years' experience of investigating noise complaints and dealing with licence applications. So I've reviewed the event management plan. As you can see from my representation, I do have some concerns about it. The site is in very close proximity to the properties on Loxley Road, and it is those properties that I am most concerned about. The context of the area is that it is a relatively quiet residential area, and I say this because it's not an area where there's a high degree of masking traffic that would sort of cover some of the impacts of the noise from the festival. It would be quite pronounced, and therefore a limit of 65 is appropriate. To go above that, which is sort of mentioned in the noise management plan, is not something that would be appropriate. It's not the centre of an urban area where there would be a high level of masking noise. I appreciate that we've heard that the firework night goes on at the rugby club. I think most people in the town have been to that, but it is an entirely different proposition to 10 hours of music on a Saturday and 9 hours of music on a Sunday, where the level of exposure would be more severe. I think Councillor Shenton mentioned about the location of the stage and the proximity to residential receptors. I'm still quite unclear as to where exactly the stage will be in relation to the proximity of the receptors and the separation distance to them. Because it's either going to be on the other side of the pitch and facing towards them, or will be directly with the back towards the residential properties in very close proximity. And in that regard, it certainly won't be the case that this cardioid array will prevent all noise from going backwards. On the contrary, my experience from measuring noise at festivals is that the cardioid arrays still allow a certain degree of noise to escape behind the PA system. They essentially work by playing low, they only work for low frequency noise, is the first thing I would say, and they are based at ground level, and they play low frequency noise in the direction of the residential properties, slightly out of phase with the noise which is being projected forward. And again, there's not much detail in the noise management plan as to the state-of-the-art system that is to be chosen, but if it is a sort of standard line array that we see at many festivals, you will have hanging line array speakers at high level for the high to mid frequencies, and they will not have any mitigation behind them. They will be directional, yes, but there will be noise that will be heard quite clearly behind them. So I'm therefore concerned that the limits may not, or which they're willing to have as a condition on their license, I'm not convinced that that limit would be able to be achieved at the residential properties. And it's a case of once the closing the gate once the horse is bolted is my concern. There are no predictions in the noise management plan as to what the levels will be at the residential properties with an appropriate front of house level. And so I think in summary, with the stage being potentially very close proximity to the residential properties, I can't see that compliance can be achieved or maintained. Even if it achieves it at times, it may not for the duration of the events. I'm also concerned about the noise from residents leaving the premises, although they have drawn the finishing time forward a bit. I do think that with potentially inebriated people going in and out of that passageway between the residential properties and going out onto the residential street, there is certainly the potential for some disruption to the local residents from the noise from people leaving. And therefore, I object to the application.
Thank you, Henry.
Ben, just a very quick question. I get very clearly that the sound level you're concerned about, and as well as the ingress and egress, etc., the noise levels generally. Is there a level at which you would be happy at, putting you on the spot here, in terms of this? We're saying 65 in here, but would there ever be a position where you would be comfortable that would maybe be a compromise position on this?
The applicant was correct in that 65 is the line in the sand that various bits of guidance would point towards as being an appropriate level for an event of this nature and for this duration. The trouble is I don't have confidence that that limit can be met and achieved. There's also limits for low frequency noise that would be appropriate, sort of 70 decibels. We would normally apply those as L max levels. And again, that would be very difficult to achieve in such close proximity to residential premises.
Hi, Ben, just a couple of questions. On the noise, can you get a noise limiter? So if it does go above, the whole thing just cuts out.
There are limiters and compressors that can be installed. It's unusual to see these at large-scale events. They do work by distorting the noise and compressing it into a tighter bandwidth. I'm at the limit of my expertise as to whether that would work with a cardioid system, whereby you're going to get some distortion of the sound fundamentally by the limiter itself.
Okay, just one more. Perhaps I noticed on your report here, concerned about general noise and distraction from the crowds of people leaving the premises, particularly at the end of the event. the site is accessed via a driveway that becomes crowded easily. I just touched on before about if people leave in a panic for whatever reason, we don't know. I mean, it probably wouldn't happen because perhaps they don't like the music, they'll leave in a panic. But, you know, if there was a panic and people had to leave, what's the consequences there coming out of a narrow driveway?
I think this is really sort of going in towards my colleague in relation to safety. Yeah, I understand it is one main access in and out, and that may have consequences for crowd safety, certainly.
Thank you very much, Ben. We have two members of the public here, Judy Oldham and Doug Wallace. I believe, yes. Would you, gentlemen, from the applicants, would you mind sitting back so we can have the two members of the public taking... Would you all mind just moving? Yes, please. I think that just then we can leave the. Yes, that's fine. I mean, just to. Yes. But just to confirm that we allow the members of the public to speak without any interruption from you. Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. So Judy Oldham and Doug Wallace, are you both? Would you both like to speak, or yes? Who would like to go first? Ladies first. Ladies first, yes.
Good morning. I live on Loxley Road, near Manor Road, and nothing I've heard this morning about noise levels has comforted me at all. We get a lot of noise nuisance from Waterside, which penetrates up to Loxley Road. You can quite often hear that at weekends. A couple of weekends ago, the Tiddington Festival, I could hear out throughout my house without any doors and windows being open. So to have something much closer proximity, I can't help but feel would be much more of a nuisance. Parking on Loxley Road is difficult. It's not that wide a road, and it is a bus route. And no parking on site for the people attending the festivals. I just can't see how we could accommodate the traffic. To say that the music festival is similar to the fireworks display, I think is wrong. I think the fireworks display is more of a cultural event and people accept it. But there is a lot of disruption, and there is a lot of the people leaving the site at the end of the fireworks display, they just fill the road, and it takes quite a time for them to disperse, and I think it would only be worse after the music festival.
Thank you. When you say it takes time for the crowd to disperse, roughly how long?
Oh, I don't know. I've never timed it, and I don't normally wait to see the end of it because it's not something that really interests me that much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Doug, would you like to?
Good morning. My name is Doug Wallace. I live about 400 or 500 yards away from the entrance to the club. The club is a fantastic club. I'm a great rugby fan myself, former player, and the club do a fantastic job for the youngsters and for rugby generally. So I really applaud what they're doing. The problem here is the site. It's totally the wrong place for this application. I note that there is already a beer and cider festival in Stratford, which takes place at the Stratford racecourse, where there's no problem with parking and no problem with sound. Nothing that I've heard this morning gives me any confidence that this will be that if the application was successful, this would be a useful event. Traffic we've talked about. We've heard a lot about Loxley Road. This just doesn't affect Loxley Road. This would affect Loxley Road, Tiddington Road, Elgin Gardens, Saxon Close, Manor Road, Avon Crescent Estate. The numbers that they hope to attract is far too many that this site can cope with. During my professional career, I worked in international event management, both in the UK and abroad. And this site I would certainly not have even considered. It's totally the wrong site.
Thank you. And is your prime concern, again, I don't want to, certainly not trying to, I'm just trying to understand your concerns. It's primarily around traffic management and parking?
Three things, really. In the written statement that I made, I talk about antisocial behaviour. We get that even at local events, let alone a bigger event like this. Beer bottles and cans being thrown in people's gardens, people urinating. So that's a problem. And this type of event, I think, would just attract that type of audience. Traffic is a major concern. At bonfire night, of course, you have to close the road. But even on Sundays, when the club has practice days for youngsters, you get cars parking half on the road, half on the pavement, right the way up Loxley Road. Sometimes buses can't get by, so if ever there's an emergency with ambulances, fire engines, etc., that's a big problem. The actual access and egress to the site is very limited. Noise is another problem. The lady here just mentioned the noise we already get from different events. The last couple of weeks there have been events at the Stratford Town Football Club, and the noise just carries with the wind right the way across. So regardless of the music, it doesn't matter whether it's pop music, ABBA or whatever, it's just the sheer scale of the noise. And although the applicant has made great play of the fact that they've got very sophisticated directional equipment, you're still at the mercy of the wind.
Thank you very much, Doug. Any questions, Mr. Wallace?
I did pay a site visit yesterday. I'm right in saying there are no parking at all on Loxley Road, is there? You can't, there's I think, a yellow line all the way up. There's no parking allowed, is there?
There's double yellow lines at the bottom of the road,
right,
and then it becomes a single yellow line further up.
Mr. Wallace, just a very quick one. You mentioned about the antisocial behaviour and teenagers being drunk, etc. Have you registered a complaint with the police or with licensing before?
No, I haven't actually done that. Maybe I should have done.
Sorry, I beg your pardons. Before we go into private discussion about it, we'll just go, I think it'd be helpful just to go round the table once more for closing comments. It would also give the panel an opportunity for any further clarification. So, Maggie, have you got anything else you'd like to... And can I just say at this stage, this would really be for additional clarification rather than simply reiterating what has already been said. Thank you, Maggie.
No, Chair, I've nothing further to say.
Do either of our residents have anything further to add?
It was commented that not many residents had complained about it, but the notices, the blue notices on the lamppost only mention boxing and wrestling, nothing about a music festival, and it was interesting to note this morning that that's not now included anyway.
So that's perhaps something we should take up. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind taking your seats back in the public gallery and the applicants could come forward. Thank you. Actually, sure. So I just wonder, if Ben, if you have any further comments you'd like to make.
No, thank you, Chair.
Ian, did you have a further question for Ben?
Thank you. Just to clarify again, when we spoke about noise levels and the cardioid system, etc., the question that I asked you, Ben, was would there be a minimum level at which you would be comfortable? I know what the applicant is saying, 65 and the base levels and etc., the other levels. But is there any recommendation or any thought on your part that what that level, that comfortable level might be that would be a compromise between residents and that, ignoring the crowd safety issues just for the moment, just concentrating on that one particular point?
Yeah, I don't disagree that 65 decibels is the right level. That comes from a code of practice that was written quite a few years ago, but still remains the most appropriate guidance for this sort of events. And that would be 65 decibels over 15 minutes for the music noise, and a level of 70 decibels in the 63 and 125 hertz frequency range. That's the low frequency range. And we normally would stipulate that under the LMAX noise criteria. The trouble is I still don't have confidence that those limits can be met, given the information that's presented here. So yeah, 65 is the line in the sand that I would say is appropriate, but that will be quite significant levels of noise that will be able to be heard inside the residential premises. That limit is set on the basis that it is for up to 3 days per year. That's what the guidance says. But I certainly wouldn't want to suggest anything above that, given that the area is a quiet residential setting.
Just following up again, just for context, if you like, what is the background level of noise in that area?
It's difficult to say. There's no information presented here as to what the background levels would be. I would suggest from experience we're probably looking at sort of 35 to 38, something like that, in that kind of quieter residential setting. But background noise is variable throughout the day, and it depends over which time periods you factor it down to. But as a very general ballpark figure, I would say 35 to 38.
Thank you, Ben. I mean, we've heard a lot from the applicants about being happy to accept the noise levels as a condition, that it seems to be a very proactive noise management policy that you're promising, as it were, and it would be monitored throughout the festival. Does that not give you some sort of reassurance about the noise level that residents would experience? Because presumably, I mean, you said a certain degree of noise would escape back towards the residents, but I just wonder how, if you could be confident that given the proactive management of the noise during the festival, if that certain degree of noise, which I'm sure the applicant would accept, there is going to be some noise escaping, would be, and this is subjective, but it would be of an acceptable level to the residents.
Sort of notwithstanding my comments about whether 65 decibels would be the appropriate level, which I would agree that it would be. The management of it is via someone with a sound level meter taking measurements and then reporting back to management, which is probably appropriate for this scale of events. But other events may well have continuous monitors so that the level is continually reported back to a central location. My point is really that with this sort of monitoring, ad hoc monitoring, there is certainly the potential for the level to go above the 65 decibels without it being recorded or reported back.
We've also had assurance that there would be a telephone hotline for residents to be able to make an immediate complaint. Does that give any further assurance to you or not?
Yes, it's something that we would always say that there needs to be a telephone hotline to these sorts of events so that people can complain directly during the performance. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a measure of compliance as to if they would meet that limit or not.
Thank you, Ben. Henry, have you anything further you'd like to add?
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I've got anything further to add at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cannon.
Thank you. Obviously, the last time I spoke was before anyone else. So I just want to touch on a couple of the points that's been made, but I'm going to be relatively swift. I'm not going to repeat any points.
Thank you.
The headline, if you like, is that it's the site, not the plan. But the plan is bespoke to the site. I mean, that's the whole point. ONTIC have been brought in to this site, and they've produced a plan to manage the particular constraints of this site. That's the whole point. It's not an off-the-shelf plan that they just roll out to any site. They've thought about this site, and so if the plan is good, it's good for this site. It's a plan for this site. So that's the sort of headline point. I don't want the bonfire night point to get lost. I'm not saying, I couldn't say, that, look, the bonfire night event is fine, so this is fine. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is this. There is annual direct precedent for getting thousands of people, more than the 2.5 that we're talking about here, off that site in an orderly way at the end of an evening. I'm not talking about bonfire night in terms of noise, music, any of that. I'm talking about access and egress, a specific point that's being raised here. And every year for 30 years, they get off that site and they don't get run over by cars, and there isn't a public safety record, and it works. And that is managed by the rugby club, rugby people running the rugby club. This is managed by a totally different level of professionality. You've got proper stewards. This is an event management company, and it's fewer people by about 1,500. Just on that point, another thing I don't want to get lost is this idea that the access is narrow. It isn't. I don't know if you've seen the PowerPoint, but you can see on the PowerPoint photo there's a car parked in it. It's the third page of Appendix 1, and there's a photograph of the access off Loxley Road, and the car takes up probably a quarter of the width. So we're not talking about a ginnel or an alleyway. This is a decent size. It's miles wider than the purple guide says you need for an access egress provision. So, I mean, it's narrower than it might be somewhere else, but it isn't narrow in any objective sense. There's plenty of space. How do I know? Because every year 4,000 upward get out on bonfire night without a problem. The other point just to mention, and I didn't say this when I was talking, is that an awful lot of these people won't need to park their cars because they'll live nearby. In fact, the vast majority of the pre-sales have come from, we can map where they come from because they have to give us their address, between, from 1.5 to 2 miles away. That's the vast majority of ticket purchases are effectively within the town. So an awful lot of people won't need a car at all. They'll walk. I'm not saying none. Of course, some people will drive, and that's why we've got the car park list and so on and so forth. Just about that point, parking and whether it's a nuisance is not really an issue for licensing. Your solicitor will tell you that. Save us insofar as it gives rise to a public safety concern, which is obviously the way it's been put by Mr. Whittington, and that's legitimate. So if the access and egress issues are a public safety concern, fine. But if it's just there isn't really any parking nearby and that'll be annoying and people park on the verges, that's not really an issue for licensing. They won't anyway. People will walk. The issue for you is there a safety issue? Mr. Biddington says there is, and that's the point. And it's really, isn't it, about whether pedestrians leaving will come into the risk of collision with vehicles. Now, I just want to say one thing about that, beyond what I've said already. Obviously, you've got the bonfire night precedent for that. It hasn't happened, more people, and it's dark. It won't be dark this time. Is Stratford, Loxley Road really so much busier traffic-wise in July than it is in November on a Saturday night? It seems hard to imagine that there's no public safety issue in November, but there would be in July because of the amount of traffic. That seems a stretch to me. Is there a safety issue in getting all these people off the site, down the exit that you can see on the photograph, and away along Loxley Road, which has a footway on both sides, at 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday night, 9 o'clock at night on a Sunday night? It's not likely to be super busy traffic-wise. It feels a stretch. So I think from a public safety point of view, this is obviously not lost on the event management people. They've thought about it and they've got a plan, and the conservative approach is to get all the vehicles off, and we're confident that we're going to do that. But even if we can't, it's still perfectly possible to get that number of people off. So I suppose I'm asking you to just focus on the public safety element of this, which has been addressed in the bespoke plan, which thinks about the collisions of this site. In fact, it's not just the main access and egress. All of the emergency exits, so both of the alternative exits, are plenty wide enough to meet the purple guide criteria. They're not, they're not pinch points. We're not using them because the access is fine, but in an emergency, there are options. That's the point about those. So that's the kind of access egress point. And then just briefly, noise. The position is really clear, isn't it, that Mr. Ellis says, and I agree with him, that 65 dB is the right limit. If we can keep it to that limit, then it's okay. Not that no one will hear it. Of course they will hear it. But the question is it a public nuisance such that it shouldn't be allowed? And he and I agree, or we and he agree, that 65 dBA over 15 minutes is the right limit. That anything higher than that gives rise to a risk of public nuisance. So no one's saying it should be a lower limit. Everyone says that's the right limit. The issue between us is, can we achieve it? And we've got an acoustic report, a noise management plan that positively suggests that limit. Now, why on earth would we do that if we didn't think we could achieve it? That would be creating huge problems for ourselves. We're confident we can achieve it. And I'm not being disrespectful to Mr. Ellis. The best he puts it is that he doubts it could be achieved, but we don't really have any reason why. Our acoustician says we can, and in fact it's his specific recommendation that that's the limit. So, I mean, I don't really want to fall back on this, but maybe this is one of those situations which is like, well, let's see. If you say you can do it, that's why we've only applied for the first year. That's why it's just 2 days. If we can't do it, we're going to be on a sticky wicket next year, aren't we, if we fail and whatever. The monitoring too, I mean, this is important. I don't want it to be swept under the carpet. It was said ad hoc at one point, but there's an active monitoring throughout the festival of the noise levels, because if you exceed a level that's conditioned, effectively you're committing a criminal offence. I mean, you just don't want to be doing that if you're running a festival. So, yes, I suppose we could have somebody at every noise-sensitive premises with their noise limiter for the whole time, but Mr. Ellis said it well himself. That's probably not appropriate for an event of this size. What we've got is an appropriate response. The plan is good, you'll remember being said, to the question of monitoring those noise levels. And remember that, of course, there will be noise, sound coming backwards towards the residential properties, but the majority of the sound will be going in the other direction. That's the way it faces, that's where the crowd are. And if the noise, so long as it doesn't exceed 65 dBA over 15 minutes, that criterion going backwards at the noise-sensitive premises, then Mr. Ellis says that's appropriate, it's not a public nuisance. And that's what we're absolutely confident we can do, and that's the whole plan, that's the idea. So the condition is the answer. If you're happy with that level, and everyone seems to think it is, then imposing a condition is the way to secure that, and then we just have to comply with it. That's our job. So those are just the things I wanted to say in summing up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cannon. That's very comprehensive. I think, are we finished now? Yes, happy to go into one final question from Councillor Shea.
We come back to this point of active monitoring and the 15-minute period. So if we look at page 47 of the pack, which has effectively got a flow chart there.
Just give me a moment to get
Yeah,
there. So
that's fine.
the internet is probably slower than Are we in the noise management plan?
Yeah.
Management plan.
Yeah, it's part of the noise management plan, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so just thinking about this, a resident says it's too loud, makes the complaint. We start at the very top, we work all the way down through this. By the time we get to the bottom, that 15-minute period could have expired by the time it's reviewed. And my concern looking at this is that where we look at the bottom left, the consultants advise vent site controller via radio or mobile phone and await further instructions. This is the consultant. And then on the right-hand side, it says the event site controller could allow the situation to continue despite being told or informed that it's above. Issue sound engineers further instructions or close sound site. What I'm not getting a comfortable feeling on this of is that if a complaint comes in, that it'll be actioned straight away and within that 15-minute time period where you would measure and how that's going to be recorded so that we could interrogate that at a future date.
No doubt there'll be various answers. I see the point. So first of all, I don't think the 15-minute period is a fixed period. It's a rolling measurement, that particular noise criterion. So it's any 15-minute period across the measurement. So I think the way it works, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, and I think this is what this flowchart is trying to say, is that let's say there's a complaint from a local resident. That then gets communicated to the monitoring team. That's in the top box. And then there's a binary question, is it satisfactory or not? And that's a 65 dBA, if that's the condition that you impose, is it above or below that? If it's satisfactory, if it's below that, then perhaps we don't need to worry about it anymore. If it's above that, that's when unsatisfactory, that's when we start going down the right-hand side of the column. The source is identified, the sound engineer is told about it. Now this is instant, you know, as soon as that's a radio call, we're not talking about probably even minutes here. And then, if necessary, it can be reduced. And then you just have to follow the arrows. That's actually sound level reduction affected. On the right-hand side is the final box, because the arrow from the bottom right box goes upwards to that one, not downwards. So if you just follow that flow chart. The options in the bottom right are the three. Allow it to continue if it's satisfactory. Further instructions, i.e. turn it down, or kill the whole thing. So all of that, I mean, I don't know how long it will take to happen, but there's no reason to think it would take 15 minutes to do that. I suspect it's a call and then a turning of a knob, essentially. But it doesn't affect the ability to monitor the 15-minute noise criterion, because that's a rolling period. But there would have to be measuring of noise in order to substantiate whether I mean, people might complain even though the noise level is well below the condition. People complain sometimes because they're disturbed, and that's reasonable. They're allowed to do that. But we need to then check if it's compliant with the condition.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add to that, sorry, in layman's terms, that what the sound engineers will do at the start of the day, they'll do a noise abatement test at the very start, and on the sound desk, they'll put it to a maximum volume. They'll be checked before we open, probably normally about 30 minutes before we open, and they set the desk there. And then the only variable will be the wind. So we have multiple roaming noise monitoring people around the site with radios at all of the noise monitoring premises, which is not a massive area. And they're normally positioned in the area that the wind blows in so that they're quickest on site. But it's a 2-second, literally, radio call. The radios go for 3 miles straight into the control centre, straight to the sound engineer, and it's actioned literally within a 60-second period. But unless there's a catastrophic failure or wind that we've not experienced, the levels are set before the show starts, and that it's impossible without physically overriding the system to go above them, depending on which way the wind is blowing.
Sorry, just one point I wanted to add, just about your 15-minute point. This is specifically dealt with in the plan. So if you look at section 8, which says noise control monitoring, in the second paragraph it says, typically we expect all measurements to be conducted over a 15-minute period, albeit shorter measurement periods may be undertaken to determine compliance, i.e. it's typical that 5-minute measurements give a good indication of compliance over 15 minutes. So there's, I mean, they've thought about that essentially, and you don't have to wait 15 minutes before you can do anything, essentially.
So just one final one. On, we've covered off noise, public safety. I just wanted to cover off because effectively we're talking about noise and safety here. One of the things that concerned me right at the outset, and it was addressed to a certain degree, was if we look at page 139 of the pack, the photos, effectively. And we have a nice picture there. Hopefully you'll get to, I'll wait till you've got to page 139. Yeah, I'm there. You're there. So on the right-hand side, we have a nice picture of a lock, yes, which is a bit concerning in an emergency. Are we saying that that would be unlocked during the whole period that the site is open?
Yeah, yes, unlocked and stewarded. So there'd be somebody on it to ensure that it wasn't being used as an access egress, right, but the lock would be unlocked, as it were.
So to be clear, has that been documented in the event management plan?
I don't know the answer to that. The answer is yes, it will be unlocked. But
yeah, just sort of to come in and say, so as pointed, we would have a dot plan, so a location of where we would have our stewards and security, and of course that would be one point that we would emphasise that we would require. To ensure egress if required, but also to sort of ensure the integrity of our site, and again, any access points that are fire exits or are sort of accessible for us to egress safely, we'd have security there as well. And likewise, again, just in terms of when it comes to egress, our deployment would have a dot plan that shows where our security will be for the egress. And again, one of the points it raised was the access through the main entrance and exit with regards to residents either side. Public nuisance is certainly one thing that we're very aware of, and there's certain things we do to try and assist with that, mitigate that, and one of those would be a sort of a strong security presence to maintain peace and direct people left and right up and down Loxley Lane, and also a couple of toilets there as well, because again I know urination's a concern as well. We would have a few toilets that are external of our main arena to accommodate some people who are leaving who've forgotten. Likewise, if we happen to have a queue for people coming in, that they can relieve themselves in toilets there as well. But yes, as part of the dot plan, which is a security deployment plan of where we would put our security and stewards, that point would definitely be one of them.
Sorry, just to clarify that. So I'm not so worried about there is concern obviously about the Loxley Road side, but these other exits which would be used in an emergency, so they'll be unlocked. You talk about stewards and security. Is it stewards or is it security that would be there? Because obviously if it's a steward, and I'm not an expert on this, but I would say that becomes a possible weak point for, if you like, attack or whatever, because we live in a world where these things do happen. So for me, this could be a potential weak point for the site. So I'm curious as to, is it security or is it a steward?
It would depend. In a position like that, it would really only need to be a steward, in the sense that what that position needs to have is a pair of eyes with a radio, as part of, again, our insurance, excuse me, as part of our security deployment. We have roaming teams, and that person, as long as they've got a radio contact, it's unlikely that someone, and again he said, that someone's going to try and break into the site and go, I'm going to break in where there's someone standing with a radio and a high-vis. The chances are, if I was to break into a site, I would go, let's not go there because there's someone with a radio and a pair of eyes. It is a matter of the safety generally for those internally who need to leave, so that we can then radio through to whatever that person's position is to say, open the gates and let them through. And Jason sort of also said that because of the size of our site, we do have the ability to have our perimeter that leads through into areas as the rugby club to the northeast and then to the southwest. So again, we're not leaving out into the roadside, but we're moving out into the fields that are beside our arena. So yes, again, I appreciate those positions can generally be carried out by a steward, but again, they may be SIA potentially, depending.
And can I just add to that, because I've just checked, if you're concerned about that, notwithstanding what Mr. Kelly said, if you're specifically concerned about those points and you wanted to ensure that it was an SIA security guard rather than a steward, you could just make that a condition and that would be fine. We can do that. Yep. We can live with that operationally if you felt like that was a necessary safeguard for those points.
Thank you all very much. So I think, thank you to the applicants, thank you to members of the public, and thank you to officers. It's been I think it's been an extremely helpful meeting so far. Just before we adjourn, Olivia, do we have any urgent business?
No, Chair.
Right, so I'll call the meeting to a close. You'll be notified with our decision within 5 working days, hopefully sooner. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.